Hey guys, welcome back. So I was just thinking that we should go back and not really that far, 2019, and get into Marvel Comics Presents, which had given us the backstory of Wolverine's secret daughter over the span of like 9 issues, which not only gives us her backstory but also tells us like why we haven't heard of her. But with the way it does it, it leaves the possibility for us to see her again. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so now for this one, it's a long story, which sounds like something somebody would say if they had a secret kid, which would kind of make this like Wolverine Confessions Part 30, or somewhere around there. I lost count. But I did do a video a while back talking about everyone in Wolverine's family. I may redo it, we'll see. But to jump right into this one, we gotta go back to the 1940s in northern France, towards the later end of World War II. But at this time we come across this witch who's being interrogated by these Nazis who, just from the looks of it, they look like your Gestapo Nazis, who like your private security, so detailing more so in private matters. And that's just my assumption from the logo on his collar. But at this time they're interrogating this witch who we really don't know much about, but at this point we do know that she had promised them some form of power, which she had later refused to give them. But with them finding her here and threatening her daughter's life, she then plans to summon this dark power and use it against the soldiers in order to get her daughter out of there. But with doing this spell to where she would summon this demon for the Nazis, but at this point with her intent to control it and use it against the Nazis, she doesn't get to finish the spell, because before she's finished, she's then spotted by Canadian soldiers, and they see this and they're pretty much like, hell no, you ain't finna do that. And a few of these Canadian soldiers make the decision to just rain bullets on everybody, which then forced this witch to protect her daughter and blast all of the soldiers out of there, good and bad, killing every last soldier except for one, who was a Canadian soldier who was regenerating just as fast as he was being torn apart. But what this also showed us was the creature that she was summoning was a demon called the Truth. But with her not being able to finish the spell, she summoned him there, but she didn't get to do the control part, which in my opinion that part should have been in the front of the spell. But then again, I'm not a witch, not a warlock, so what do I know? But when this happened, the last Canadian who was left, who of course was Logan, who leaped to her aid to take this thing out just before it popped her head like a grape. But because the Truth cannot be killed, she then had to work out a way to banish the creature so he wouldn't tear Logan to pieces. But also, if the Truth were to kill her, then it would be pretty much stuck because her magic brought it there and her magic has to send it back. But in this case, with Logan buying her enough time to finish the spell and banish the Truth, but with what she can do in this short amount of time, it was only a temporary solution. Because with her suffering fatal injuries from the other Canadian soldiers, she quickly had to tell Logan that every 10 years this demon would return, and that from here on Logan would have to help her bloodline send it back, which would mean that about 10 years from now he would have to find her daughter and protect her so that she could send the Truth back for another 10 years, which as a result would mean that no matter where Logan was, every 10 years he'd have to figure it out, find this little girl, and help her save the world. But of course, 10 years later in 1954, Logan completely forgot. Like, finding somebody kid and saving the world is the last thing on his mind at this moment. Because at this point, it's like 8 years after World War II, the world is rebuilding in a positive direction for the most part. And at this point in his life, it's like one of those chill moments, which for him, there's very few. But in a moment's notice, he was pulled over to China, to where at the time there's the great disaster of the flood of the Yangtze River, which is like the 3rd largest river in the world, just under 4,000 miles, to where at the time when this river flooded, it had claimed the lives of close to 200,000 people, which at this time was literally like the worst place in the world. But it's not too long before we find out that Logan was brought here by the daughter of that mysterious witch, who he had completely forgot about from 10 years ago. And as it turns out, at this point in time, she's not like too polished with her magic, which explains why she dropped him in the river and not like on land. But it's here where she tells him her name is Sylvie, and she's the 15-year-old daughter of the witch named Marie, who Logan had saved 10 years ago. But also what we would find out is like when the Truth will return, it would intentionally try to pop up in like the worst place possible. And although Sylvie was only 15, she was the only person who could do anything about it. And when Logan got here, he gave her his word that he wouldn't let anything happen to her. But when the Truth popped up, she was just like, oh no, bump this, I can't do it, I'm out. And out of fear, she left him there to face this thing by himself, which at the time was one of those things where it's like, you can't really blame her. She's a 15-year-old kid. And when she seen this thing that terrified her when she was 5 pop back up when she was 15, it only makes sense that she would be scared out of her mind. But of course, only minutes later after she pulled herself together, she came back to help Logan put the Truth away once again. But after this, jumping forward to 1962, which is 8 years later, Sylvie is 23, and she's way more polished and proficient with her magic. But in the case of the Truth, it's also gotten smarter every time as well. So at this time when it appeared in Nevada, it had the whole plan of luring them towards the H-bomb from Project Sedan in hopes that they would be just incinerated upon arrival. But at this point in time, with Sylvia using more of that experience, she made sure that they arrived there with a force field for protection, which is something that from here forward they would continue to do, but in this case it especially came in handy. But this time, after pushing the Truth back, Logan is pretty much like, yo, you pulled me away from eating a steak, and I very much appreciate it if you put me right back in front of that steak so I can finish my food and go about my business. But it was here where Sylvie asked Logan just to stick around a little bit longer so that she could at least get to know the guy who pops up about every 10 years and more or less helps her save the world. And so at this point, when he's like, okay, sure, why not? And she just snaps her fingers and she takes him to Paris. But with doing so, she had a ton of questions like, does he have a family? Or even his thoughts or opinions on fate and destiny. And as for Logan, at this point, he doesn't have any family that he's connected to. And at least those that he remembers, at this point, they're long gone. But this really brings them into the conversation, whereas like first in Logan's case, he doesn't get too far caught up thinking about family or even trying to make peace and joy last for too long, because for him, if it's one thing that life's taught him, that there's another fight right around the corner, which is something that Sylvie very much relates to. And she tells Logan that it's possible that this quote-unquote misfortune could be something that's tied to his fate. And it's then when she relates him to a force for good or elemental power who's meant to face these things and keep some of these terrors at bay, which is something that reminds me like back when we were talking about the hunt for Wolverine, because back then we went back to Wolverines, which connected the death of Wolverine and the hunt for Wolverine, and it was at that time where Destiny had also mentioned to Mystique that the world needs Wolverine. And we definitely got to talk about Destiny soon, and mainly with Dawn of X and some of the real reasons why Charles doesn't want her back. But as for here, still in the 60s, dinner conversation. Because in the case of Sylvie, she then expresses to Logan that she feels like so far in her life she can never really enjoy peaceful moments. But Logan tells her like that's the thing, like you just got to live in that moment rather than just thinking of what you know is coming later on. And when he tells her this, Sylvie's pretty much just like, okay, well I'm gonna take your advice 100% and absolutely live in the moment. And so later on, after thoroughly taking Logan's advice, she leaves him a note and then she leaves from there to go visit the rest of her family. And when she arrives there, she tells them it is done. And as it turns out, her coven, which is made of her aunt and cousins, they had told her like since her mother was the one who originally did the spell to summon the Truth, that the power to do so could only be passed through her children. And in this case, who better for Sylvie to make a child with than Logan, who had successfully kept the Truth at bay 3 times already with the help of their family. Which then takes us to the 1970s, to where at this point, Sylvie, she has a family, she's married with a husband, multiple children. And when the time comes for Sylvie to face the Truth, her husband's aware of this, and for him it's like, okay, this thing that you've been telling me about all this time, like, okay, wow, it's actually happening. So he understands, but at the same time he doesn't have any powers to like help her out, so for that reason he gets it, she has to go, and he has to stay back and watch the children. And so now for this instance in 1970, it brings them to Bangladesh, to where at the time you had the insane Bola cyclone. But when they got here, it was pretty clear that the Truth had set them up, because he had pretty much pinned them up in a situation to where they had to make a decision to either save the small group of people or for Sylvie to save her power so that her and Logan could face him, which also pinned them with this kind of moral decision to make as well. But what they ended up doing is deciding for Logan to go down and help the people while Sylvie stay up top and face off with the demon herself. And with doing so, she was powerful enough to send them away alone, but this time things went left, like extremely left. Because before the doorway had actually closed, the Truth reached out and pulled her in, which immediately for Logan began this issue that he would think about for like close to the next decade, and of course in between the other things he was already dealing with. But along with that, in the back of his mind, he would still be haunted with the idea of how he would eventually find the Truth, and after that, when he eventually did, how would he send it back, with at this point him no longer having Sylvie to help with the spell. And throughout the 80s, regardless of what he had been through, whether with the X-Men or in Japan, it's like even still this clock in the back of his mind was ticking about this other instance that few knew about, that he knew he would need to get to, which eventually in 1989 brought him to the doorstep of Doctor Strange. Because at this point he was facing like this 3-year window, and this demon could pop up at any moment and he just wouldn't know it. And so with him going to Doctor Strange, who of of course offered him a cup of tea, cause it would be strange if he didn't. But as it turned out, Strange was familiar with the demon called the Truth, and though he didn't know Sylvie, he had a pretty good idea of where her coven was located. But with being able to help Logan with the location, which then led him to the French Alps, but also with the name of Sylvie's coven, Clan d'Arquines, this also gave him more of a name to ask for, aside from just Sylvie's first name. But when he got there and he was approached by like Sylvie's aunt, she was pretty much like, don't worry about it, we got a solution for the Truth, we good. And from there, she just relocated Logan to Australia, telling Logan she'd make sure he'd never find them again. Which now takes us to the 90s, to where at this point Logan took a different approach and he solicited the help of Talisman, who he had known from his days with Alpha Flight. And so what Talisman had did from the information that Logan had gave her, she had ended up setting a magic tripwire that would let her know when the Truth came back, and when it did, she would just teleport Wolverine and the X-Men over there. But so now when Talisman got the Amber Alert that the Truth was there, the X-Men and her, they all got wrecked. And Cyclops, he was the first to go. Talisman, who's like the only magic wielder, she was taken out pretty quick, and like right after that, Storm was impaled like it was a slaughter, which was pretty much what Sylvie had described that it would be, with her saying that the Truth cannot be killed, but on top of that, it can only be sent away with her magic, or that of her bloodline which came after her, to where lo and behold at this moment, her daughter shows up, pops claws, and it's like, okay, we got another Wolverine baby. And when she shows up here, it's pretty clear like this is who her grand aunt was talking about when Wolverine had showed up 10 years prior in the 80s looking for her mother Sylvie, because as we know, it came to the point where it was the plan of her coven, since her mother Sylvie had to continue the bloodline, that the coven wanted her to continue with Logan, so that way they can produce a protector who was both in one, both witch and warrior. And this is the reason why in the 80s her coven, d'Arquines, they had pretty much told Logan that his services were no longer needed because she was now their new answer. But even with Logan seeing her here for the first time, she then after that leaves before Logan can even get her name, because she very much has a I'ma do my job and I'm out kind of way about her, which from here sends Logan on the hunt for trying to find his daughter. And so coming out of the 90s into like your first decade before 2010, in order to find her, Logan keeps himself like on the brink of what he believes to be like the worst places in the world, like back to back, in hopes of finding his daughter again, which is something that doesn't pan out until 2008 when he finds her facing the creature in Mumbai, which yet again he was only able to do from just chasing the worst incidents to the worst incidents. But one thing that he did know with the search for his daughter was that because she's much like him, she would age a lot slower, but this would also put her in the predicament to where she would need to deal with this curse a lot longer. But at this point where she's made aware that Logan is watching her, and mainly because she's picked up his scent, but it's also here where she gets into a bit of her backstory, and really with doing so defending herself before he's even said a word. And it's also here where he hears her name for the first time, which is La Reine du Rien, which in French means the Queen of Nothing. In her entire life, she's pretty much accepted this role that her whole purpose is to protect her clan and protect the world, but not really have a life outside of that. And it comes to a point where she gets a bit frustrated with Logan not saying anything, but really with him being quiet this whole time, he was allowing her to just get all of this off her heart, because he knew deep down inside that she didn't mean that she didn't want anything more, because that's no kind of life for anyone to live. And it isn't until she gets into his face before he tells her that, look, I'm here to help you out. We're both gonna go to hell. We're gonna kill this thing so that way you can finally be free. Which for Logan was the least he can do for this daughter, which he didn't know anything about. And he lets her know, like, had he known about her sooner, then he would have done this for her a long time ago. And initially she declines the offer, with her being so deeply rooted in her purpose, but Logan nearly begs for her to let him do this for her so that she'll at least have the opportunity to live a life that's not as messed up as his. But when she finally agrees and he asks her, like, how do we get to hell, she lets him know, like, getting to hell, that's the easy part. Like, anybody can get to hell. And to help him out, she opens a doorway for him, which he goes through without hesitation. But it's pretty messed up like the way he was greeted, because as soon as he entered through this door, he's met by a serpent who tells him, like, we've been waiting for you. We had a room ready for you since you was 13. Which really wasn't much of a room because it was like pitch black, but he wasn't in there for long, because we find out that his daughter Ren, she had actually came in after him, knowing that even still they might not make it back, with the way out being much more difficult. But she lets him know that all her life she has studied him and she knows that he's a man that deserves better. But while they're down here, and really with no kind of plan whatsoever, like they just down here like, we looking for the truth. And so far, he's nowhere to be seen. But when Ren senses something and she goes to check it out, and Logan just follows after her, thinking that she's going for the truth. But as it turns out, she's found her mother. And when they find her, Logan lets her know, like, I'm glad we found you, but we're here to kill the truth. And Sylvie just busts out laughing cause Logan looked like Keanu Reeves. I'm playing, that's not really why, but he do though. But when they find her, she does give them a bit of information that helps them kind of figure out how to resolve this problem. Because in this instance with the truth who cannot be killed, but yet and still the truth is a demon, and demons like everything else die. This then makes the truth a bit of an oxymoron, or perhaps even a paradox, but nonetheless it pointed out another flaw in this creature, which Logan tells them they just need to figure out what to do with it. But in the case of what not to do with it, like fighting it in hell, like that wasn't the move, because trying to kill it down here was nearly impossible. But it's here where Sylvie takes Logan and Ren to a room where the demon would bring her to try to torture her just before he would make his move after every 10-year hiatus. And he would try to do this in this room which was full of multiple doors, to where behind each one there were some of the most painful moments in Sylvie's life, which then gave Logan the idea to take them all back to the night that he saved Sylvie's mother, and with doing so, hopefully the truth would follow them there. And like with coming up with this plan, like Logan, he's really onto something. But with the truth on their back, he immediately turns up the situation 100 notches, jumps on Logan and tears his arm off, which just goes to show you how much stronger this dude has gotten over the years, with him just snapping adamantium like it's a twig. Plus he's theoretically stronger in hell, so there's that. But with Logan's plan of luring him here to the same night that he had first met Sylvie, he intentionally wanted the truth to meet the truth, because also with doing this, each version of this creature, it would then have to face the contradiction of itself, being that it's a creature that can't die because they are both the truth, but even with that, the truth is that everything dies, which really just sets the two of them up for facing each other and fighting each other forever and not being able to kill one another. But even with that, like in this case, there's still one problem, because if they continue to take this route, then eventually they're just gonna tear the world apart. Which is when Sylvie's mother, Marie, who is the mysterious witch we had seen from the beginning, she lets Logan and Sylvie know that they had to make the ultimate sacrifice to put this thing away forever. But what's bittersweet with this, with future Wolverine coming from Earth TRN 758, his younger self from Earth 616, he'll still be here. And all the X-Men and everyone who died from his Earth, their lives will also be spared with his sacrifice, or pretty much the sacrifice is being made with Logan and Sylvie. But this time around, with doing this spell, it's not like the truth would just return every 10 years. But with these two sacrifices being given, instead both versions of the truth would just be locked away forever. But also with the fate of the two of them forever tied to these versions of the truth, so that if at any point they were ever summoned or made free, then this Logan or this Sylvie, they would come back and have to banish them again. But once again, with this being done and them giving this sacrifice, the whole 10-year coming back thing is gone. But in order to do this, it did come with a severe price, with it also locking away Logan and Sylvie for what possibly could be forever. But also with them doing this, they prohibited the versions of themselves in the 616 universe from ever having to deal with any of this. And also because of that, the young Sylvie, she never lost her mother, Marie. And for Ren, who at this point is free because of her father, from this moment forward, she now has the opportunity to live her life the way that she wants, which wouldn't have been possible without the help of her father. And so once again, Wolverine gets the residual love or hate from a child from another alternate universe. And so now real quick before we go, just want to give a shout out to all the Patreons. Thank you guys for your support. And if there's anyone here who wants more information on how to join the Patreon squad, I got a link down below, or you can head over to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. So now this was a video I was going back and forth on doing for a while, but I kind of wanted to just get it out with the chance that she may pop up at some point in Krakoa or perhaps even in Excalibur. And it could be a stretch with me thinking that, but let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, because it could be just me or it might be something for later. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.